Welcome back once again to the Power Up Live podcast stage presented by KeyBank Capital Markets in partnership with Suncast Media. My name is Nico Johnson, your host for our next session, The Future of Energy Storage, a conversation with Fluence. And I am joined on stage by the Senior Vice President and President of the Americas, John Zaranczyk. John, good to see you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Absolutely, man. It is my pleasure. If you're watching live at suncast.live, if you're watching out in the audience on the Jumbotron, thanks for joining, and thanks to all of this wonderful audience. Fluence always rolls deep. You guys brought a crowd. Thank you. Today, we're going to talk about storage, and that's what one would expect that we're going to talk about if we have a conversation with Fluence. Fluence is changing the way we think about storage, changing the way we think about distribution of energy broadly.
Right.
And, I think that one of the things that that impresses me about Fluence is the heritage of the work that you guys started at AES. And John, you've been in energy storage since longer than Fluence it was around as a brand. Can you give us a sense of the perspective and scale from your earliest projects to today?
I think that's great to hear about and to think about. Is I often reflect on that. I was telling our team as I walked around the floor, when we would come to some of these events in the early days, we'd say we were doing something with batteries and energy storage. People would say, I don't really know what you're talking about and what's going on. Today, just walking across a casino floor, all you hear is people talking about batteries and energy storage. So those early days, we were doing projects that were 1 megawatt in scale and 250 kilowatt hours. Yeah. And we were buying batteries at a cost of about $3,000 a kilowatt hour. So just for contrast, we're something like 95% reduction in the cost of batteries.
$3,000 a kilowatt hour.
$3,000 a kilowatt hour. We go back into 2007, 2008 with those first systems. First 1 megawatt system we deployed in Indianapolis, a whopping 250 kilowatt hours of total energy stored to do frequency regulation. And we've scaled up since then. So at every stage of the industry, we've been pushing the forefront, going from 1 megawatt to 10 megawatts, 10 megawatts to 100 megawatts. We're now doing systems that are on the scale of 200-300 megawatts, 4, 5, and 6 hours in duration. So massive growth in what people are using. And really, storage has become a substitute for a power plant today. When we started it, it was a relatively small ancillary device. And today we're really building these instead of building new gas-fired peakers.
Absolutely true. Jigger was just on the stage and he was talking about how we are shifting as an industry from building these peaker plants to building energy systems. And we have sort of legacy centralized and now distributed energy storage, power generation at the home. Fluence, last year we talked with Kiran Swami.
Yes.
I always get his last name wrong. About your virtual distribution of energy storage. What are the innovations that you have been either a part of, but also surprised at the velocity that have come online with regards to storage?
I think the scale has been something we anticipated, because when you take a technology that you can largely manufacture in a factory and then you start to scale it up, we saw that when solar started to make that big turn, right? We went from relatively small projects to all of a sudden these mega projects. I think we're seeing the same thing happen in storage. And that's one of the convictions that we've had. And people have tried gravity systems and compressed air and all kinds of ways to store power. But one of the things we really liked about batteries is the ability to scale it up rapidly, have relatively dense systems, things that you can put in. We've manufactured our Gen 6 system now. It's mostly made in a factory, and we can get to site and put it in place very, very quickly. You don't have emissions on site. You don't have something unsightly, so permitting goes more smoothly. So I think the industry has really all moved to where people have accepted this now as if we're building something new, we're incorporating storage into it. Even just a few years ago, it was still a little bit of a unicorn, a rare beast. And, now I think it's become much more commonplace. We're still at the early days. There's lots to come, but it's fun to see that it's in the common conversation.
It absolutely is, especially if you're in markets like New York and ERCOT down in Texas.
That's right.
One of the things that I remember from my early days developing down in Latin America was watching the AES and then eventually the Fluence team starting to integrate storage for grid resiliency, first in Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic and throughout Latin America, where, let's face it, peaker plants aren't running on natural gas, they're running on bunker fuel,
on diesel,
right? So storage began to offer grid resiliency in these disparate remote communities long before we brought it online in major economic areas.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah. And in those places, what we went in and said, hey, in a lot of those places, it wasn't so much about green or clean.
Right.
It really was about reliability of the grid.
Yeah.
We needed something that really could deal with the fluctuations that we see, and smaller grids have more fluctuations.
Yeah.
So we dealt with that first, and then we did cost reduction. So those places, it was much cheaper to put storage in than have to have these plants burning all the time to deal with whatever events might come in terms of conflicts. And then third, we got clean, right? So that's the nice thing is we're starting to turn those diesel plants off. You don't need them running. Even then, we've moved up the chain and we're starting to turn some of the gas-fired plants off because of this. And then, finally, we started to say, hey, there's a deep integration here between renewables and storage. And so you see a lot of co-located facilities that are allowing more solar, more wind to get on the grid because this is providing that resilience and backup that the grid needs.
And helping avoid curtailment.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Just super important in a lot of markets, not just here in the United States. As I mentioned before, when I was kind of watching you all develop what ultimately became Fluence, first in these remote grid operations, and then more broadly, the thing that impressed me was that it was, for the most part, we'll call local content, sort of domestic. It was cottage at the time, but domestic manufacturing of a sort. Everybody's talking about the tailwind that is the IRA. We talked at length here yesterday with the KeyBank Capital Markets folks about kind of what developers are looking at from an energy storage perspective. But the juicy stuff here around energy storage is, we see press release after press release after press release of solar module manufacturers and Nextracker. I don't know about any other racking, like Nextracker seems to open a new factory every week, but we've got a lot of participants in the industry who are talking about domestic content. I don't see that so often in the energy storage sector, with the exception of Fluence. Could you talk a bit? I mean, there are homegrown. I don't mean, of course, there are folks that are also manufacturing domestically, but we don't see the noise about it. We don't see the promotion of it. And I feel like it's an area where folks aren't, they don't understand the undercurrent of what's actually happening. So could you bring us up to speed about the nature of domestic content?
Yeah, I think, we saw a few years ago when we ran into COVID, all of the disruptions in the supply chain, right? And I think that made people aware of how fragile that was at times.
Yeah.
The difficulty of getting things from Asia into the United States, in particular, shipping became incredibly expensive. In some cases, even at an incredible expense, the ship didn't exist, wouldn't show up, had problems, and so we noticed that frailty, and we were seeing the growth of these markets and saying, we're not going to be able to sustain a large scale, healthy market unless we distribute some of this. And so Fluence made the step then to start to do regional manufacturing and regional production. We opened a facility in Salt Lake City more than a year ago where we're doing production and integration of batteries into our enclosures, and then we distribute throughout. We made the decision to start building a module of our own, and so that will be a U.S. produced module. And then along came the IRA and all these incentives to do things domestically to build up the U.S. Manufacturing and supply chain. And we've entered into a partnership that we announced a few weeks ago with ASC Envision. So we'll be taking all of the capacity of their Nashville plant into energy storage, stationary energy storage. Those batteries will start shipping, domestically made, U.S. made battery cells at the end of 2024. And we'll be shipping completed systems at the beginning of 2025. We're already making offers to our key partners to begin doing those systems. So we'll start to see U.S. domestically qualified battery systems at scale in 2025.
And for those who are unfamiliar with the general timeline, you mentioned some of the supply constraints. If I were to try and buy batteries, either from reputable Southeast Asian providers today, what's the typical timeline for delivery of being able to receive that kind of product?
I mean, just to buy and then manufacture, you've got probably 4 months, and then you've got shipping transit of a couple months. So we're taking all of that transit time out. We're reducing the manufacturing time. And then more importantly, we're getting away from those risks of, whether it's the Ukraine war, whether it's something next that comes, geopolitical tensions with different parts of the world. Those are all risks that as people move to large scale projects, tax equity funded projects that need to be done on a certain timeline, we're trying to take all of those risks out for the developers to say, we're sure that we can get this there. We can get it there on a date certain. And you have the benefit of the bonus ITC tax credit adder because it's domestically produced. So we see this as a bit of a game changer. the United States is the largest market for energy storage, and it's a very large market for EVs, second largest market for EVs. And so having a domestic supply chain that's deep makes sense here. This is the beginning of that. And we've tried to be at the forefront, as you mentioned, going back many, many years. We're trying to be at the forefront of the next transition, which is really diversification of the supply chain.
Yeah. So a lot of people on the forefront have arrows in their back.
Yes, I have a lot of scars.
I'm going to be the voice of the skeptic developer out there. Why do I care that Fluence is a first mover when all of Southeast Asia is going to be trying to figure out how to be a fast follower to you? What's the advantage of a developer working with a first mover?
I think it's a couple things. One, we're not just a first mover. I think we might be the only first mover who still has a continuous organization over 16 years. So we're a first mover who didn't die from the arrows in the back.
There you go.
So I don't know if we're just tough, tough guys. We patched it up. So we have the voice of experience. We've done a lot of things first over and over and over again, and we know what it takes to do something first. It's not pretty. It's not clean the first couple things, but we stay in it and work it out. Our teams have been through all of that. The domestic content, I think, really is about risk management. We saw what people have gone through on the solar panel side over the last few years with you bought something and you can't get it into the country because of various restrictions on forced labor, or you start to have major tariff changes. Those are real risks that boards and other companies are dealing with. And a year delay on a project, a 2-year delay on a project, that might be the whole return of that project in terms of having cash sitting for that long. So we've never failed to deliver on a project. Sometimes it takes us a little longer than we thought, but we work with customer through that. So I think having this domestic content gives us one more step down in that risk matrix and one more option. We're not going to exclusively buy in the U.S. We have a supply chain that's global, and Fluence operates in a lot of countries. So we still have the diversity of sourcing things from overseas. We have a partnership with a European manufacturer, Northvolt. So our goal has been take advantage of what's built and at scale already in Asia, start to diversify into European production, start to diversify into U.S. production, and use that supply chain to drive the benefits to the customer as quickly as we can. And everything Fluence does is about scale. We believe this industry and energy storage is going to be much, much bigger. Everything we've done from the beginning has been aimed at, let's make it bigger. We did the partnership with Siemens.
Which is why you didn't start trying to manufacture from the beginning. It was integration at the beginning.
Exactly. Take advantage of the established supply chain, the cost efficiencies, and then be a big buyer so that we can deliver that cost efficiency to our customers.
Absolutely. Well, talking about being a big buyer, you sell to big buyers, and I've got a lot of procurement folks that listen to Suncast. So I want you to talk to them. Put yourself in the shoes of, my buddy Lenny John over at Strata, gigawatt pipeline, buying a lot of batteries. How do they filter the wheat from the chaff? Can you give us some insights? What parameters matter in this competitive landscape as a buyer?
Sure. What we're seeing more and more frequently in my conversations with customers is certainty of supply is a key element, right? So they've been through this period where bought from somebody, maybe they couldn't fulfill, they had to go back and buy from somebody else. A lot of developers have experienced that. Bought from somebody, very material delay, and we're dealing with something. Bought for somebody, we get into the field and a local AHJ has a lot of permitting questions about safety and other topics, and you have a material delay. Bought from somebody, got through permitting, get to final testing. Oh, the utility has a few requirements that they may not have totally mentioned that you need to do to get the system online. Material delay. And what we're seeing is tax equity is a key lifeblood to this industry. They run on timelines. The difference between December 31st and January 1st for tax equity supplier is a year delay. So they're starting to allocate tax equity to the people that they think have the confidence that they're going to get the project done, certainly. And what we're trying to bring on every frontier is we will get you there, certainly. And we have the supply chain, we have the technical know-how, we have the systems integration capability, we have the software, we have permitting expertise. We will get you to completion. And that's what I think buyers are looking for as they move from buying one project at a time to having gigawatt scale portfolios. How do we go with somebody that we know can continue to do things with us over and over again?
I think one of the things as well that I've seen you guys focus on that I don't know if you, I don't think we talked about bringing it up specifically, but I know you've been doing a lot of burn tests and just really focused on safety. What's public about what you could talk about the crazy tests you're running?
We've been pretty public about it. We put our first system online in 2008. And we went from 2008 to 2019 before we had a major event. I would say that's for two reasons. One, we were very focused on safety and really focused on the fact that something could happen and trying to limit that. But two, the systems were a lot smaller, and cumulatively, we just didn't have as much deployed as one system today might be as big as things that we did for almost 10 years, right? And so it's getting bigger. Even if you have a very small risk of something happening, as these get larger and in more and more places, the likelihood that you're going to have an event increases. And so what I would say is we learned in 2019, going through an event with Arizona Public Service, a lot. We went through a fire, and not only did we have a fire event, but we had people injured in that. And that was something that we thought we had taken every precaution to deal with people getting injured. And what we found is things happen in an event that you don't totally anticipate. Lots of human beings are running around doing their own thing. And it caused us to really rethink our whole design philosophy.
Right.
And what we did when we moved to the Gen 6 is we materially changed the form factor. People can't enter it. We added additional safety features with deflagration venting. We changed our philosophy from suppress a fire to make it burn. We want to consume any kind of combustible gases that come out of that unit. And we were very open in working with Arizona Public Service on evaluating that event, coming through, taking all the lessons and incorporating them. And now we've gone even farther to say, not only are we going to try to be safe when it happens and take things down, but we're proactively burning things.
Yeah.
And so 9540A, I think, was a good step for the industry. It's helped us. It's not sufficient. And so we've gone to what we call the Fluence Beyond test. I sort of affectionately call it the Hellfire test. It's just
that's what I mean.
Burn the hell out of this thing and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
How does it propagate or not propagate? One of our goals has been, when you have an event, reduce the probability of the event, first of all, right? So we've done that. Then make sure that nobody's near it. And we've set a very consistent story of, hey, if something happens, do not try to save it.
Right.
Let this piece of equipment fail. Let's get through the event quickly and keep human beings away. There's no reason for somebody to get hurt. This is like a transformer fire. We have that commonly in the industry. We'll let it fail. We'll replace it. And then keep it small. That's the next thing, right? So we don't want it to propagate side to side. So we've done a lot of testing to show, hey, this isn't going to go from one unit to another, and then replace it fast.
Yeah.
So some of these fire events, people are out of service for a year, 2 years or something.
Wow.
Replace it fast so that system can get back in and do the job.
It's really a year or more.
Yeah. Because people do investigation and then they do replacement and then they have to order equipment.
Talk about risk mitigation.
We're trying to get into that modular way of thinking. And I think the insurance companies are starting to pay attention. The off-takers are paying attention to say, hey, the goal here is human safety, but that safety also converts into sort of reliability.
We talked a bit that last year with Karen, I talked about storage as transmission. I'm starting to hear a lot about this kind of an application of technology for storage.
Sure.
Let's talk about your outlook for storage as transmission. What does that mean, first of all? And then if I'm a developer, how do I think about that?
Yeah. Well, we see these places all over the queue. I mean, everybody's dealing with limited interconnection space. We're dealing with, in many cases, it's the reliability of the transmission grid where they're holding capacity back for an event to fail. What we can do with storage in a lot of cases is provide that backup using the storage and free up actual capacity on those lines or eliminate a congestion point. So it may be that at the busiest part of the year, this line is overloaded, this transformer is overloaded. It's very difficult to upgrade that full line, expensive, costly. It may just not even be able to be done in the community. By putting storage in, we can extend the life of that line, eliminate that congestion, and do essentially like a virtual transmission line. So we've won a number of large projects in Europe. Those are starting to go forward. These are 100, 200 plus megawatt systems that supplement the transmission grid. We've started talking to people in the United States and South America about the same thing. And I think that's the next frontier for storage is we've seen storage as generation.
Yeah.
Now we're going to see storage as the network also.
And in this case, you're selling to Duke and PJM and CPS, right? You're not selling to a developer.
Well, in some cases, developers are proposing those projects. Okay. And so in the United States, we have this system where somebody can propose an alternate transmission system. And if it's more cost effective, they can win that project and do it.
And you're winning these deals.
That's what's beginning to happen.
That is amazing.
Some of this is people getting the vision for it and then doing the technical evaluation. But we're doing it in Germany. So they know a little something about technology.
They're a little further ahead.
They're a little conservative in terms of how they evaluate it. And they're moving ahead with very large scale programs.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
One final question. What keeps you up at night?
Your interview? No, beyond your interview?
Beyond prepping for the interview.
I would say, it's always sort of the safety element just because you don't want anybody to ever get hurt from what's going on in there.
Yeah.
But so I think that's it. I mean, we have a lot of good people working on that, but that's always as it gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
How do we continue to manage how we think about that? How do we interact with customers to do, the next phase of making it safe, reliable? So.
Well, I continue to be impressed by things like the Hellfire test and feedback that I get from developer friends who have integrated sort of the Fluence mindset. I mean, to your credit and how you've built the company, your marketing team does a tremendous job of casting the vision for where Fluence sees the technology taking the industry rather than the industry taking the technology.
Yeah.
And I think that's part and parcel for the kind of innovation we've seen from AAS and Fluence to date.
Great.
John Zaranczyk is the president of Americas for Fluence. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. Hope you do it again soon.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great to see you.